What's up? Welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with my 2025 Oscar predictions. Of course, the 2024 Oscars are done. Oppenheimer, of course, dominated. We got to think about who will win next year. Of course, these are the early predictions, the initial forecasting. Tons of movies will surely bubble up that are not being thought of right now. Lest we think about this past year. No one was talking about Anatomy of a Fall this far in advance. And look what happened with that movie. So, looking ahead, I'm really going to go through a few dozen prospective Oscar contenders, movies that are plausible to be nominated for various types of Oscars, whether that's contending for Best Picture or something down the line. And I'm going to kind of categorize them into two areas. The really high profile movies, and then the probably less famous but more conventional awards type movies. And I'll also note a few movies that probably won't be releasing for this Oscars, but if they did, would certainly be in the mix. So let's just kind of jump into it here. Of course, leave a comment. Let me know what you think is most likely to contend at next year's Oscars. Let me know which of these you're most anticipating. I'm anticipating many of them. But yeah, let's just jump right in. So obviously, Dune Part 2 stands out as a big contender next year. Now, whether it's actually going to win Best Picture and run it up in to that degree, hard to say. But Dune Part 1, several nominations, including Best Picture. Denis Villeneuve was in the mix for Best Director. I think a lot of that's very plausible once again. Tons of technical categories, certainly up for nomination. I mean, if anything, Dune's probably the favorite to win many of the technical categories, whether that's cinematography or sound or visual effects, production design, costume design. There's a long list. Do I think anyone's certainly in the mix for acting nominations? It's hard to say. It really depends on the rest of the year shakes out. I mean, Timmy and Zendaya, as much as I love them, probably won't be able to contend. Javier Bardem, perhaps supporting, is the most likely. Stilgar, Lassana Gaib, almost a comedic nomination in a sense. That would be awesome. Probably best not to project it, but I would certainly root for it. But yeah, Dune Part 2 kind of makes sense. It'll be there for sure. To what degree is kind of the question, and whether it ends up winning Best Picture, or this is kind of viewed as more of like a Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers situation, where the crowning and the celebration happens with the third film. In this case, the third Dune film, which we know is coming at some point. Hard to say, but it'll certainly be nominated. In terms of the other big stuff, I think there's certainly a drop-off from here, but Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, George Miller's follow-up to Mad Max Fury Road, a prequel, of course, starring Anya Taylor-Joy. That cannot be overlooked for the Oscars because, of course, Mad Max Fury Road, much like Dune Part 1, was a huge dominating force, in below-the-line categories at the Oscars back in 2015. And, Fury Road ran it up and had several wins. I would expect Furiosa, assuming it's up to the same standard as Fury Road, that the trend would continue. So we should keep that in mind. Also should note Joker 2, Joker Followed You, from Todd Phillips, starring Joaquin Phoenix, Lady Gaga now in the mix. We cannot overlook that movie because, of course, the first Joker was nominated for Best Picture. Joaquin won for Best Actor. I'm not expecting the same degree of success, but it certainly should not be overlooked. I also don't think we should overlook Ridley Scott's Gladiator 2, whatever that ends up being titled. Paul Mescal, Denzel Washington, Pedro Pascal. Gladiator 1, of course, wins Best Picture, one of the more dominant Oscar movies of the last 20 plus years. Am I expecting the same success for Gladiator 2? No. Am I very much anticipating that movie? Absolutely. I think it's going to be good. I'm really excited about it, and I would not be shocked if that gets some nominations. Now, whether it can be like a Best Picture nominee, like a Top Gun Maverick was for Paramount a few years ago, probably not, but it'll certainly be in the mix. Also, big movie, John Chu's Wicked Part 1, starring Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande. Really hard to say how that one's going to go. We have to know how good the movie is, for starters. But musicals sometimes can break through, and it'll certainly be one of the biggest movies of the year. Also, we should note, on the animated front, there's a few high-profile movies. Of course, Pixar's Inside Out 2, coming out in just a few months, and also Disney's Moana 2, whatever that's being titled, at the end of the year. And also from DreamWorks, The Wild Robot. So we don't have a Miyazaki Studio Ghibli movie this year. We don't have a Spider-Verse movie. But we do have, I think, those three, which are still some pretty heavy hitters in the animated category. And Inside Out 2, who knows? Could that get nominated for Best Picture? Probably not. But Toy Story 3 did. You never know. And then in just kind of the below-the-line category, specifically leaning towards visual effects, we should note a few blockbusters. Deadpool and Wolverine, Godzilla x Kong New Empire, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and also perhaps Lee Isaac Chung's Twisters. So overall, due to the strikes, it's a slower, svelter year for the blockbuster. So it's going to be a less populous Oscars, I'm almost certain. We don't have Oppenheimer and Barbie to carry us through the way we did last year, which was truly a great movie year. But I think with Dune Part 2 in particular, and also perhaps stuff like Gladiator 2, Joker 2, Inside Out 2, Furiosa, there'll still be some big movies in the mix. But that kind of does it for the big movies. Now we got to go to the smaller stuff that's probably more traditional when it comes to thinking about what awards movies, what Oscar contending movies that we think of. A movie I'm very much anticipating would be Steve McQueen's Blitz, starring Saoirse Ronan and Harris Dickinson, of course, about the bombing of Britain. And, Saoirse Ronan needs no introduction to the Oscar follower. She's been nominated many times despite her young age. Steve McQueen, of course, has filmed 12 Years a Slave, wins Best Picture. Harris Dickinson, a rising talent. That's a movie I think we can lock in for some nominations. Another film I think it's pretty close to locking in for some nominations would be Conclave from Edward Berger, the German director, his follow-up to All Quiet on the Western Front, which won several awards for Netflix 2 years ago. This has a November 1st release from Focus, very much being positioned as that type of movie with Ray Fiennes and Stanley Tucci and John Lithgow in the mix. Sounds really good as well, about a papal conclave situation, fictional one. So I'm very excited about that one. Got to remember the international voting body, the international representation at the Film Academy definitely puts their weight behind some international filmmakers. So I think a film like Conclave will have a lot of juice for it come this fall. Bong Joon-ho's Mickey 17, I would have thought would be in this mix too. Again, Bong, international filmmaker, his last film won Best Director, won Best Picture, The Great Parasite, of course. But Mickey 17 was delayed out of March 2024, which I thought was a fine idea. I was like, all right, they'll delay it to the fall. It'll premiere at one of the upcoming festivals. Makes sense, film starring Robert Pattinson. But then Warner Brothers delays it all the way to January of next year, which almost feels like it's being taken out of the awards mix. It's very weird what's going on with Mickey 17, so I really don't know what to say about how they're going to treat the movie. We hope and demand that they do release this movie. Obviously, we can't be too certain with the Zaslav Warner Brothers era. But yeah, Mickey 17, kind of an odd one, unfortunately. We should note The Bike Riders, another film delayed out of last year from Jeff Nichols, starring Austin Butler, Tom Hardy in the mix. I don't know if it's going to be a true Oscar contender, but you never know. Also coming out in the middle of the year would be Yorgos Lanthimos' new film, Kinds of Kindness, with Emma Stone in the mix. Now, this is an anthology film, so I wonder if the Yorgos juice and the Emma Stone juice, of course, reiterated to us once again, Emma winning her second Best Actress, and Yorgos continuing to be an Oscar stalwart, international director as well, a lot of support for him. Kinds of Kindness being an anthology, I'm not sure exactly how strong it'll be come award season. Really hard to get a feel for that this far out, but you can't ignore it. Also, Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis might be coming out this year. Adam Driver and a whole bunch of other people are in it. Might be Coppola's last film ever. Again, we have no idea what that's going to be like. A lot of his late period films are not very good as well. So certainly got to note it, but you cannot bank on it. That's for sure. We have not one but two Luca Guadagnino movies coming out. Of course, Challengers, delayed out last year, starring Zendaya, Mike Faist, and Josh O'Connor. Very excited about that one. That one might not be as awards friendly, though, as his other film, Queer, starring Daniel Craig. So we'll see what happens with the Luca movies. The film that premiered at Toronto last year, Sing Sing, starring Coleman Domingo, that one seems very likely to be in the mix here. Coleman Domingo's performance was celebrated in that movie as well. Of course, he got nominated for Rustin at this past year. It sounds like the wagons will continue to circle around Coleman Domingo, who's just so well liked. He's so charismatic, and of course, he's so great as a lead performer as well. So I would not be shocked if at least his acting performance gets recognized for Sing Sing. I just want to shout out Back to Black, the Amy Winehouse biopic coming up soon, starring Marissa Bella. You never know how if that one's really good, a la the Elvis film. Who's to say? Could get through. I'd also like to acknowledge A Real Pain from Jesse Eisenberg with Eisenberg and Kieran Culkin. This film premiered to rapturous response at Sundance just 2 months ago. And, might say, Sundance not traditionally an Oscar contending, launch pad, except last year, that's where Past Lives began its journey, one of the best movies of the year. So I don't think we can count out a real pain. I want to note Pedro Almodovar's first English film, The Room Next Door, with Tilda Swinton, Julianne Moore, and John Turturro. Last time Almodovar made a film was Parallel Mothers. Penelope Cruz got a nomination for that. Alice Garland's Civil War, I just want to acknowledge it because Garland's one of the unique filmmakers we have. I don't think it's an awards contender, though. It definitely seems to be more action-leaning. The Apprentice, a film about Donald Trump, Sebastian Stan playing the man, Jeremy Strong playing Roy Cohn. You also have Maria Bakalova in the film. I have no idea if that's an awards movie. Maybe a nomination for a performer. Who's to say? We have no idea how good that's going to be either. Certainly, that's a movie that could go either way in terms of reception to it, obviously. We don't know much about this one, but Andrea Arnold's film Bird, starring Barry Keoghan from A24. A lot of juice behind Keoghan these days, should be noted. There's a boxing film coming out from Rachel Morrison with a script by Barry Jenkins. The film's called Flint Strong, starring a newcomer, Ryan Destiny, who could be a breakthrough performer, in the mix for those kinds of awards, but supporting performance from Brian Tyree Henry, and we know how great he is, so keep an eye on that one. Pablo Larraín has another movie coming out, Maria, starring Angelina Jolie. Of course, his last film, El Conde, kind of got a surprise cinematography nomination over at Netflix last year, so we'll see what happens with Larraín. He's been pretty serviceable and consistent at getting awards attention for his films. Look back on, like, Jackie, for example. Paolo Sorrentino has a new film, Parthenope. We don't know too much about it yet. I believe Gary Oldman is in that, but, between Almodovar and Sorrentino and Guadagnino and Bong Joon-ho and Yorgos Lanthimos, that's a lot of international filmmakers that are already on the radar, to say nothing of the filmmakers and films that we don't really have an eye on just yet. The Piano Lesson, another August Wilson film adaptation. This one has Samuel L. Jackson and Danielle Deadwyler and John David Washington in the mix. Again, produced by Denzel Washington, directed by his son Malcolm Washington, and of course starring his other more famous son, John David Washington. Look back at Fences a few years ago for similar Oscar, and award success for a August Wilson adaptation featuring Denzel Washington. This one's pretty exciting to me. We Live in Time, John Crowley's new film. Of course, John Crowley gave us Brooklyn, back in 2015. Then he also gave us The Goldfinch, which we don't have to talk about. But this stars Andrew Garfield and Florence Pugh. Need I say more? Also, we should note Richard Linklater's upcoming film Hitman, starring Glenn Powell, which will be on Netflix. Really rapturously received. It's coming out earlier in the year. I'm not sure exactly how awards contendery it'll be. Linklater's certainly up and down in terms of breaking through with contention and that sort of thing. So I guess it depends on how much of a campaign Netflix wants to run for it. So yeah, that's a ton of films right there that are immediately on the radar, but there's obviously stuff that we don't yet foresee. So yeah, that's a bunch of films already on the radar, and of course more to come that we don't yet foresee. And then just some other movies that people might be thinking about that are not going to be in the Oscar mix this year. You have Paul Thomas Anderson's next film with Leonardo DiCaprio. That was dated for late 2025, so it's not this Oscar year. Quentin Tarantino's the movie critic that hasn't started filming, so almost certainly will not be contending this year. Noah Baumbach's recently announced Netflix film almost assuredly will not be out in time. Same for the Wes Anderson film that he's filming right now. He doesn't really rush out his movies. Think about the gap between French Dispatch and Asteroid City. He usually takes his time with these. Similarly, Ari Aster's just announced film Eddington almost assuredly will not be out in time. But let me know, which of these movies are you most anticipating? Which do you think will most likely contend for Oscars, whether it's the big ones or the small ones? And what do you most want to see? And for more movie reviews, Oscar predictions, awards predictions, not just the Oscars, but the Grammys and the Emmys too, subscribe. And I'll see you next time.